1, 2, 3, 4.
And George Conway, thanks for being on this morning. I'd be remiss not to ask you about the story about John Weaver, who is a founding member of the Lincoln Project. 21 men accusing him of online harassment. Your organization has a pretty clear statement on this kind of harassment, but wanted to ask you directly about this issue.
Yeah, it's terrible and awful and appalling and unfathomable. I didn't know John very well. I frankly only spoke to him a couple of times on the phone early on in the Lincoln Project. It's almost, I don't even know what to say. It's just terrible. And it leaves me speechless, frankly.
Here's some of the details. His solicitation, I'm reading from the New York Times reporting now, included sending messages to a 14-year-old, and not like in the distant past, like in the very recent past, asking questions about his body while he was still in high school, and then more pointed ones after he turned 18. He said that he told one man he would spoil you when we see each other. He's always holding out these sort of like positions in politics to these young men to try to get them to coerce them potentially for sexual. But these are all the allegations here. And again, he's denied that he did anything to it. Well, he did say that it was inappropriate, but said that he thought it was consensual, et cetera, et cetera. I guess the big question here, Philip, is like, it seems like this was kind of an open secret in Republican circles. You have some of these young men, when they would describe the abuse to others within political circles, they would guess that it was John Weaver. This was clearly, allegedly a pattern of behavior here, just judging by the number of young men that have come forward, 21 now, who came forward to the New York Times to say, yes, this happened to me too. How does behavior like this stay, a secret in Washington for so long?
Yeah, it's an embarrassing question for anyone on the right, because even looking at that New York Times story, the allegations were made public on Twitter and then in a separate magazine article weeks earlier. And there's a problem when the immediate response is, oh, well, this was an open secret. How many awful, disgusting open secrets do people on the right have to contend with? And this is what is so embarrassing for folks at the Lincoln Project. Their central premise was that they were going to be the conscience for Republicans at a moment when Republicans had lost theirs. And so they are going to lose all credibility if they cannot show that they are willing also to take responsibility, to clean up their own house. And so far, the statements that they have put out, that they had no idea that any of this was going on, those seem hard to believe.
Yeah, and Phil, let me just follow up on that, which is that, our friend of our show, Ryan Gerdusky, he wrote an article about this weeks ago in the American Conservative. It was openly he was talking about it. And to your point, somebody went back and found a 2004 piece in The Atlantic in which Karl Rove apparently told everybody about how John Weaver had made a pass at a young man at a past Republican convention, and they described it as a vicious smear and as a lie. So it seems that people in Washington have known about this for what is that, almost 20 years ago, or not 15 years ago now? And it's only after the New York Times even reported it that the Lincoln Project felt like they needed to disavow it. You see, denials from George Conway, for example, this morning being like, I barely knew the guy, basically. I mean, he co-wrote an op-ed with Weaver not that long ago, so they're trying their best to make it seem like they didn't know what was going on. But at the very least, these allegations have been surfacing for at least a month, and they have not grappled.
Yeah, they're going to try and memory hole this, and perhaps they had no idea who the real John Weaver was. Maybe they didn't hear about all of these allegations going back to 2004, like you just mentioned, or the Ryan Gerdusky magazine article that you just mentioned. But that makes you wonder, if donors are going to trust these guys with tens of millions of dollars, wouldn't you think that the responsible thing to do would know who you were going into business with? If you're Conway or Rick Wilson or any of those other guys, wouldn't you think that the basic due diligence is to make certain that the person that you're working with is of upstanding character before you go attack an entire party for not being of upstanding character? I mean, this stuff is gross, and frankly, from a journalistic perspective, it's really disappointing that the New York Times had to finally weigh in and to get people to pay attention when this was clearly out there before.
Yeah.